Welcome to my video where we will explore the fundamental concepts of web development. I'm going to share with you what we've learned in class. By the end of this video, you will have a clear understanding of HTML, CSS, Bootstrap, JavaScript, Node.js, Express, Mongo, and Forms. During this presentation, I will be first giving an overview on how the concepts interconnect and a high-level description of the concepts. Then I will be diving deeper into JavaScript and finally giving a live coding demonstration. Web development involves various interconnected concepts critical for creating and maintaining websites and web applications. To provide a more comprehensive overview, I created a mental map that illustrates how these concepts come together. The development of a web page consists of two essential parts. The pink part is responsible for the front end, which focuses on the user interface, and the blue part is responsible for the back end, which focuses on the behind-the-scene functionalities. On top of them, JavaScript plays an essential role in both client-side and server-side. Understanding how these components interconnect is crucial for web development, since it's a collaborative effort between different technologies. By serving different purposes and having distinct responsibilities, they work together to create a functional, efficient, dynamic, and user-friendly web application. Now let's zoom in on each concept. HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. It forms the fundamental structure of web pages, offering a method for organizing and giving meanings to web page content. An HTML document comprises various elements that are employed to envelope distinct content segments using both an opening and a closing tag. In this example of HTML element, H1 is the element name. The class block and the ID block inside the opening tag are two attributes of the element, where the text before the equal sign is the attribute name and the one after the sign is the attribute value. The tag's basic HTML demo is enclosed by the text, which is the body of the element. I've created a simple HTML file demonstrating basic elements. This is what it looks like on a web page. If you right-click on the page and click Inspect, it will bring you to the Developer tool where you can inspect the HTML structure. One fundamental element used to collect data from users is a form. HTML forms provide a structured and user-friendly way to create interactive elements like text fields, checkboxes, drop-down lists, and buttons, which allows users to input information and submit to a server for processing. Here, I just create a simple form that asks users to input their name and age. Upon clicking the Submit button, the data will be sent to the URL specified in the action attribute, since the form is using HTTP GET method. For now, there is an error because I will also need to create a server-side script to handle the form data. Now, as I finished implementing the structure of the page is still poorly styled. Here is when CSS comes in. CSS is a style sheet language that controls the visual presentation and layout of HTML documents. In this example, the CSS code selects all paragraph elements and sets the text color to red. This is how CSS works, using selectors to target HTML elements and apply styling rules to them. Selectors can be based on element names, classes, IDs, attributes, and more. This is what the page looks like after I applied CSS to it. I also used division elements to wrap different sections. In the Developer tool, you can inspect the CSS style of each HTML element by clicking on them. The star selector selects all elements and sets the text font to Lato. I centered both the title and the link paragraph by selecting H1 elements and all elements with the ID description. For the list, I will also need to set the display style to inline block. The original image is too big to fit the screen, so I set the width smaller and the height as auto to maintain the aspect ratio. Lastly, I wrap each input field into a division element and apply margin values to them. In CSS, elements are classified into two primary categories based on their rendering behavior: block level elements and inline level elements. Block level elements create rectangular boxes for the content and start on a new line, while inline elements perform the opposite, just like the one I used for the list. Since division elements are block level, the age input field is displayed in a new line. Bootstrap is a popular front-end framework designed to streamline and simplify the process of creating responsive, visually appealing, and consistent web applications. Bootstrap offers a pre-built collection of CSS and JavaScript components that developers can easily integrate into their web projects. I'm going to briefly introduce some of the commonly used features that I can employ on my demo web page. Here I applied a card container to wrap the two lists and used grid system to make them each occupy half of the screen vertically. While Bootstrap provides a lot of convenient and ready-to-use features that can make the process of styling HTML much simpler, it is essential to use it thoughtfully and consider whether it's the right tool for a specific project. The next concept is JavaScript, which is a fundamental client-side scripting language running in the user's web browser and enables developers to add interactivity and responsiveness to web pages. It operates in conjunction with HTML and CSS, allowing developers to define responses to user actions and events, manipulate the document object model, and handle data, including fetching and presenting information from servers. To use JavaScript in a web page, you can embed it directly within HTML using the script element or include it from external files. In my example, I chose the first option by initializing a JavaScript variable in a script element and linking the text to the division element with the class name JSText. In this way, I can also apply CSS styles on the text printed by JavaScript. In the context of web development, we also need to understand Node.js, which is an open source and a cross-platform JavaScript server-side runtime environment. It allows developers to run JavaScript on the server rather than just in web browsers. By running code in a single-threaded non-blocking event loop, Node.js makes it efficient to handle asynchronous operations like file I/O and network requests. In this Node.js demonstration, I created an HTTP server using the createServer method that takes a callback function with two parameters, the request and the response objects. This server instance sends text as the response body to the client, and the server listens on the specific IP address and port and prints the server information on console. Express is a minimalistic web application framework for Node.js. It is used to streamline the process of building web applications and APIs, making it easier to handle tasks like routing, middleware, and serving content. This simple Express demonstration is basically doing the similar thing as the one I provided for Node.js. It defines the route and handles requests. When a GET request is made to the root URL, the callback function is executed and sends the text as the response to the client. Although it looks the same as the Node.js approach, and it may sometimes have more control over the request and the response, it abstracts many of the lower level details of working with HTTP, making it more developer friendly. The choice between these two approaches depends on the specific project requirement. The final concept is MongoDB. Being a NoSQL database system, it is used for managing and storing unstructured or semi-structured data in a flexible and JSON-like format. MongoDB is different from traditional relational databases as it uses a flexible and schemaless document structure. This block demonstrates data insertion and querying using MongoDB. It first specifies the URL for the MongoDB server, the name of the database, and the collection it will be using. It then creates a MongoDB server and does write and read operations. This is what the database looks like after insertion, and finding a non-existing document will return null. Let's take a deep dive into JavaScript, which is one of the most important concepts in web development. JavaScript is a versatile scripting language that runs in web browsers and can also be used on the server side with Node.js. It allows you to add interactivity and dynamic behavior to your web pages. Its syntax draws inspiration from Java and C, offering support for both object-oriented programming through object prototypes and classes, as well as functional programming. JavaScript supports various data types, including 7 primitive types. All the other types are categorized as objects. In JavaScript, variables are declared using the var, let, or const keywords. Var is a function scoped. Variables are visible throughout the function in which they are declared, but not a set of it. Let and const are block scoped, meaning they are only visible in the block of their declaration, such as loops and if statements. In the context of the same scope, variables declared with var can be redeclared and reassigned, but let declared variables can only be reassigned but not redeclared. And const variables can neither be redeclared nor reassigned. In order to understand and to be able to handle scoping errors, it is important to be familiar with the concept of hoisting, which is a behavior where variable and function declarations are moved to the top of their containing scope during compilation. This means you can use a variable or function in your code before it has been declared. In JavaScript, only var declared variables are hoisted. For example, in this block of code, there will not be an arrow. Instead, it will print undefined because it is actually interpreted like the one on the right. You have to be careful that only the declaration but not the initialization are hoisted. Operations and loops in JavaScript are similar to other languages, so I will skip them and focus on JS objects, which consists of key-value pairs, where keys are strings or symbols that uniquely identify values. On the left is an example of object creation using literal notation, and on the right is using object constructor. The name and age are called the properties of the person object. You can access the properties using either a dot notation or bracket notation. The value of an object can be of any type, so there could be a nested object where an object has another object as one of its values. And objects can also have methods as their property values. By giving an add function to the object operations, you can easily do addition using the object. And finally, this is the syntax to destruct an object. Being a single-threaded language, JavaScript powers asynchronous programming with an event loop. An event loop works by keeping a call stack and a callback queue. In this example, when function f1 is called, a new stack frame is pushed onto the call stack. When f1 calls another function f2, a new stack frame is pushed again. And when f2 finishes executing and returns a value, it is popped from the stack. And the same applies for the stack frame of f1. In addition to call stack, JavaScript has a callback queue. Asynchronous operations like set timeout, DOM events, or HTTP requests place their callbacks in the callback queue when they are ready to be executed. The event loop is responsible for constantly checking the call stack and the callback queue. If the stack is empty and there are tasks in the callback queue, the event loop will take a task from the queue and push it onto the call stack for execution. In JavaScript implementations, one important and useful feature is a module, which allow you to export and import code into separate files, making it easier to manage your projects. You can choose between a common JS module and an ES6 module as they differ in syntax and behavior. However, it is recommended to use ES6 when developing web applications since it supports asynchronous loading. I'm providing a demonstration on the syntax of ES6 modules. In my operations file, I have defined two modules for adding and subtracting two numbers and exported them. In another JavaScript file, if I want to use the two functions, I will need to first import them. And the syntax is shown at the first line. It is important to specify the type to module in your package.json file, indicating you are employing a ES6 module. JavaScript is incredibly useful for dynamically altering the DOM. In this demonstration, I've designed a web page displaying some student information including their name, age, and education backgrounds using only HTML. You can notice from the HTML file, I manually entered all the content, resulting in significant repetition. This approach can lead to a mess when dealing with extensive information. In this case, we can use JavaScript to create HTML content dynamically by utilizing reusable code blocks. In my JavaScript code, I defined a module named JSDemo to load the data from a JSON file and render it in an HTML element specified by the ID. I'm going to break it down step by step. So the third line selects an HTML element with the ID infos. The getCode function takes a user object as an argument and returns an HTML string. It generates each card with user information. The setCode function takes an array users as argument. By calling the getCode function, it concatenates the HTML code of each user and sets it to the selected element body. The loadData function fetches data from the user information.json file and parses the response and gives it to the setCode function as argument. The fetching and JSON operations are asynchronous and each returns a promise. So to make sure that the operations are fully finished before the program moves to the next line, you have to add the await keyword and the async keyword in the function definition. After linking the JavaScript file in HTML and delete the hardcode sections, you can see that the page looks exactly the same. JavaScript can be used to handle events like button click. On this page, there's a button and some text underneath it. I want the text to change after I click on the button, so I created some JavaScript code. What it basically does is to select the button and the text elements from the HTML document, An event listener is added to the button. When the button is clicked, the function defined in the add event listener block is executed, which is setting the content of the text to button clicked and the text color to pink. In the next section, I will be doing a live code demonstration, introducing how to integrate all the concepts I talked about, and build a basic website for storing and displaying user information. I'm going to use Visual Studio Code as my text editor, and I need to first install all the extensions and packages needed. Prettier is used to format the code, making it consistent. You can install it inside of VS Code by navigating to the left extensions panel and search for it. Other requirements are ESLint and NoteMon. ESLint is used for static code analysis. It helps developers to find and fix problems in the code. And NoteMon monitors for changes in the Node.js application files and automatically restarts the server when it detects any modifications. These tools are extremely useful during the developing and debugging procedures and can be installed and configured on the command line. Just follow these instructions. After you configure the package.json file, don't forget to set a type to module indicating you are using a ES6 module and add a script as a shortcut, so that every time you run npm start, NoteMon is also running along with the program. After the environment is set up successfully, I'm first creating the required files in different folders. I will have a server.js in the root folder for the backend operations, and a public folder containing all the front-end stuff. This includes a index.html file, a index.js file inside the JS folder, and an index.css file inside the CSS folder. Then I'm going to write the HTML code first. By typing just HTML as a shortcut, and I can choose HTML5 from the dropdown. I'm wrapping everything visible inside a container div element and giving the page a title user information. For the title, I use the h1 element. Then I'm creating a form for collecting user input. Inside the form, I will first have a div element for the name input. And inside this element, I'm having a label and an input field. I specify the input to be required. Then I'm going to have another div element for the age input, basically doing the same thing. And finally, a div element for the button. I set a button type to be submit, so that the content of the form will be posted if the button is clicked. At last, I'm adding an empty list where the user input will later pop up. I'm also linking the index.js file as it will process the user input dynamically. Next, I'm going to make the page prettier by first employing the Bootstrap framework. I will need to include a link to its CSS and JS files, which can be found on Bootstrap's website. I decided to use a predefined button, so I searched on the website for button styles. I want to use this primary button, so I just copy the class name into my HTML code. Then I also want to define my own CSS styles. What I did is just setting the font, giving some spaces between elements, and remove the list styles. And finally, don't forget to link your CSS file to your HTML head element. In the next step, I'm going to develop my index.js file. I will first need to select the form and list elements, as I need to get information from the form and modify the content of the list. So I'm adding an event listener for form submission. It begins by preventing the default form submission behavior, which prevents the page from being reloaded and allow JavaScript to handle the submission. Then I extract the values from the two form inputs, name and age. By making an asynchronous HTTP post request using the fetch API to a URL infos, it sends a JSON object in the request body containing the name and age. It awaits the response from the server, and if the response is successful, it reads the response data as JSON format and append a new list item to the selected UL list element. And at last, the input fields are reset to empty. The final file to be configured is server.js, which first imports Express and MongoDB. It initializes an Express application and sets the port. I also set a MongoDB URL, which is found in my MongoDB compass. Here I create a new database and a new collection for storing the user inputs. The code serves static files from the public directory, and the middleware to parse JSON data is set up. Next, I define an HTTP post route at the infos endpoint. When a client signs a post request to this URL, it triggers the route handler function, which first establishes a connection to the MongoDB server and the specified database and collection. It then extracts the name and age values from the request's JSON body and stores them into an object. Next, I insert the body, the object into the collection and close the MongoDB client. Close the MongoDB connection. Finally, it responds to the client with the info object in JSON format, which will be rendered on the page in the list. After all these are done, I have to start the Express application by calling the app.listen method, and I print a log message to indicate the success. Let's try to run the program on the command line by typing npm start. Remember, it's what we configured in the package.json file. By running the command, you can see the log message saying the server is running. And going to the port 3000, the rendered page is displayed. I will put some random values in the text fields. And by clicking the submit button, the input is rendered on the page. And we can also check the database to see that the inputs are actually stored. To sum up, we explored the fundamental concepts of web development, including HTML, CSS, Bootstrap, JavaScript, Node.js, Express, Mongo, and Forms. By understanding these concepts, you are on your way to becoming a proficient web developer. Keep practicing and experimenting to enhance your skills. And here are some additional resources for your future learning. Thank you for joining me in this video. I hope you found this video informative and engaging.